Om. 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 Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Lokashankaram. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badharayanam Sutrabhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. We are on the topic of Vijnanamaya Kosha. This Vijnanamaya Kosha comprises of the intellect and the 5 organs of knowledge. The material with which it is made is Sattva Guna Pradhana. So it has the ability to reflect consciousness. Consciousness that is all pervading is reflected in the buddhi, and the reflected consciousness, the reflecting medium, and the reflection, all 3 together is what is Jivatma. Now, since Vijnanamaya is endowed with this, it is extremely brilliant. That's one thing. And secondly, where that Atma Chaitanyam is there, that is the same place where this reflected consciousness is also there. The jiva, where the jiva is, that is where the consciousness is there. Because of this, you may call it proximity, or you can also call it is co-located. It is there in the same place. So, because of that reason, what happens is the Vijnanamaya attributes are seemingly transferred to the Atma. That Atma is Nirguna, doesn't have any attributes. The The Vijnanamaya has that. So the qualities of that Vijnanamaya, of that intellect, etc., that gets transferred as if, seemingly only. So this transference is what we call adhyasa. Another word is superimposition, adhyasa. This is only delusion, and because of this delusion, the jiva, the individual, takes Vijnanamaya kosha itself as a self, as itself, and suffers because of all the limitations, etc. Suffers from samsara. So this was explained further, and we saw last class. Yoyam vijnanamaya praneshu hridhi spuratyayam jyotihi kutastas sannatmakarta bhokta bhavati upadishtha. The effulgent Atma, which is present in every sense organ, which shines in the mind and intellect, that Atma is immutable by nature, changeless, but because of this adhyasa, it seemingly becomes karta bhokta, doer, experiencer. This is all because of this superimposition of the Vijnanamaya kosha attributes onto that Atma. And further, it was said, Swayam parichedamupetya buddhehe tadatmya doshena param mrushatmanah sarvatmakas sannapi vikshate swayam swata prutakvena mrudo gadat niva. Gataniva. So it assumes the limitations of the intellect by mere identification with the false entity. Even though it is the self of all, it sees itself as different, just as a part being different from clay. So we have seen this idea of superimposition of attributes and suffering because of that. Now we continue, verse 191. Upadi sambandhavashat paratma Upadi sambandhavashat paratma Hyupadi dharman anubhati tadgunah Hyupadi dharman anubhati tadgunah avikarivannivat ayo vikaran avikarivannivat sadaikarupopi parasvabhavat sadaikarupopi parasvabhavat upadi sambandhavashat paratma Hyupadi dharman anubhati tatgunah ayo vikaran avikarivannivat sadaika rupopi parasvabhavat. The same idea of taking the lower I, the inferior I, and its qualities, and superimposing it on the higher I or the superior I as its qualities. That confusion, that adhyasa is again restated in a different language. Sada eka rupah. It's always the intrinsic nature of the superior I is always one, ekarupa. I'm always one alone in the form of Paratma, the Supreme Self, the original consciousness. See, in this verse, the words you have to rearrange a little bit to form a meaningful sentence. We have to connect the words properly. You have to take the Paratma from the first line and then you have to connect it with Sada Ekarupaha. As the higher I, the Paramarthika really, the superior I am ever non-dual. Just as if you take the dream, there are so many objects in the dream. The dreamer is there, and there are so many different things. But where did it all come from? It came from the waker. It's only the waker who is projecting everything. So the waker is non-dual. The things, objects in the dream are many. The real identity is that of the waker only. In the same way, as the superior I, as the higher I, that consciousness, Chit Chaitanyam, I am ever non-dual. Now, this superior I, Upadi Sambandha, associated with the Upadi, the mind, intellect, body, etc. They are the Upadis, which are inferior. So many differences are there. It is limited, knows very little, all those. But identified with that, the lower I, which is the mind with reflected consciousness, with ahankara and everything. So, upadi sambandha vasat. Because of the association with the upadi, then upadi dharman anubhati. The superior I also appears with the properties of inferior I. The superior I, the higher I, appears to be, seemingly appears only, having the properties of the lower I. What are the properties? Ahankarasya kartrutva bhoktruttvadi dharmaha. The properties of that ahankara are kartrutva, bhoktrutva, enjoyership. They're all transferred, superimposed. Ahankarasya kartrutva bhoktruttvadi dharmaha atmani bhati. Those properties up in the Atman, Atmani, seemingly appear in the self. You remember the example? A crystal, colorless crystal, placed next to a red hibiscus flower. It appears red. That is the transference. Nothing happens, it just appears. Crystal doesn't become red. Looking at it, you see red crystal. That's all. Similarly, the condition of the super I is that gunaha, the property of that, referring to the upadi. Properties of the upadi is superimposed on the higher I. Again, this transference is not real. Okay? It is just a seeming. And we need to be very clear about that. Very important. There are other situations sometimes, for example, when an object comes in contact with a cloth, the object color is really transferred. It happens. When you're washing your clothes and Some of them are not fast colors. You put your nice white along with some color, and then your beautiful white shirt comes out pink. The dharma of that pink, let's say a towel, has gotten transferred to your nice polo shirt. You have a nice looking pink polo shirt. The transference is real. The color has, and it'll take several washes and some real tough bleach to get rid of that color. By the time you get rid of the color, the fabric will also be gone. Anyway, but that is real. But in the case of the crystal looking red, that is not real. And therefore, in the case of real transference, karma, action is required for purification. In the case of false transference, knowledge alone is enough. Action also will be of no use. Okay, so this transference of all the limitations of the upadhis onto yourself, okay, in one way, we are lucky. It is not real. So you don't have to do so many actions. Not required. You just need to know. So knowledge is the key. But, we are so steeped in this ignorance. It's not easy. But if you just know your true self, then there's no problem at all. So this is what happens. The self seems to have all these sanchita karma, agami karma, prarabdha karma. And if those karmas were real, and if the self really had all that, how are you going to wash off all those karma? Each karma, how are you going to get rid of them? Can you imagine how big your sanchita bundle is? None of us have a clue. We don't have a clue to that. How many countless births we have had? We don't know. None here know how many births we have already had, how many actions we performed, what all karmas we have accumulated. If we have to get rid of that, if those karmas were real, they are all in ignorance. We think we have all that. That is all in the dharma of the upadhis. Yes, Jiva has all that. But the essence of Jiva, which is that Atma Chaitanyam, doesn't have any of that. But in ignorance, we mix it up. And if you really have to get rid of all that karmas, you can never do that. The only way is to get this knowledge which will render all those sanchita karma null and void. That is why we put so much emphasis on gaining this Atma Jnana, self-knowledge. No washing is required, no removal of any kind. Only knowledge is required. Knowledge required is no papa, no karma can be transferred to the self, and that self I am. It's only a apparent transference. Then why do we prescribe karma yoga? That is an action. Karma yoga doing purification for the Atma? Karma yoga is for the mind purification. which is again the upadhi. So that you can get to know. So when the mind is purified, it becomes qualified, becomes prepared to know the self. And that is the role of karma, karma yoga. And here, to illustrate this transference, Shankaracharya gives an example. Ayo vikaran avikari vannivat. Like vanni, fire. Vannivat, like the fire which pervades ayas, ayo vikaran, an iron piece. The fire does not have a shape of its own. Fire has no shape. But when the fire pervades the iron piece, the fire also appears to have the shape of that iron. So instead of saying iron ball, we use the expression a fireball. In fact, the fireball does not exist because the fire itself is formless. How do we say a fireball? The shape of the iron is transferred to the fire. The ironsmith heats the piece of iron, puts it on the anvil, and hammers it. Changes its shape. Suppose he is making a horseshoe. He may take a iron rod, which is cylindrical, a long cylindrical rod, puts it in the fire, and then shapes it. And that long rod is slowly shaped into a horseshoe, U shape. The straight rod now becomes U shape. And as he does that, you can see the shape of the fire. Initially, when the iron rod is just put in and it is heated to a high temperature, it'll be a long, thin iron rod. Then, as he hammers it into the U-shaped horseshoe, it becomes a U-shaped fire. Here, the iron is the upadhi and the fire is the upahitam. Upati dharma hai upahite vasante. The properties of the upadhi seemingly appear on the upahita. The red color of the hibiscus flower appears on the colorless crystal. Therefore, Shankaracharya says, Swabhavat paraha. By its own nature, Atma is beyond, unaffected by the attributes. So what it means is this samsara, all the suffering, etc., is vyavaharikam. Atma is paramarthikam. All right. The student says, Shishya Vuvacha Brahmenapanyata Vastu Brahmenapyanyata Vastu Jiva Bhava Paratmanah Jiva Bhava Paratmanah Tatyupaderanaditvat Tadupaderanaditvat Nanadirnashayishyate Nanadirnashayishyate Brahmenapanyata vastu Jiva bhavah paratmanah Tadubateranaditvat Nanadirnashayishyate. So the student is raising a question based on the understanding that samsara has no beginning. Samsara is due to an error. Mistake only. The error is taking the attributes of the inferior I to the superior I. That adhyasa, that's a transference superimposition. It is bhranti, delusion, error, mistake. And that is caused by ignorance. Not knowing my true nature is that Satchidananda Atma. I've taken myself to be something else. Now, when did that ignorance begin? When did that ignorance begin? Any ignorance is beginningless. Okay. If it had a beginning, what does it mean? If you say ignorance had a beginning, at time t0, what did you have before that? It just starting. So before that, it was not there. Ignorance were not there. You had the knowledge. You had the knowledge and you lost it. How is that possible? So ignorance is always a beginningless only. Suppose I ask you, do you know Chinese language? You say, I don't know. Then I ask the question, when did your ignorance of Chinese language begin? There may be some people here, one of you might know Chinese, but otherwise, when did that ignorance begin? Never. So, ignorance always has no beginning. Anadi, beginningless. If ajnana, ignorance is anadi, then ajnana janya adhyasa. Ajnana janya adhyasa, the superimposition that is born out of ignorance. That should be beginningless. This adhyasa, superimposition, this transference you're doing because you don't know, ignorance is there. So if ignorance is beginningless, this superimposition will be beginningless. So, student wonders, how can a beginningless thing ever have an end? We say whatever has a beginning has an end. So the flip side of it should be what? Something doesn't have a beginning, it can have no end. Is that it? We know whatever has a beginning, it has an end. Now, samsara does not seem to have a beginning. Then samsara cannot have an end also. So this moksha, what moksha are you talking about? Continue without an end, moksha is not possible. And Vedanta is presented as a moksha shastra. If moksha is impossible, why are we wasting our time studying all this? You may wonder. So the student says, all my effort is going to go to waste. So look at the sloka. Paratmanaha jiva bhavaha astu. We have come to the conclusion that Paratma has jiva bhava. And why? Whatever be the reason, Brahmena api anyatava. Let it be because of error or otherwise. Student says, I'm not bothered about whether it has happened because of error or it has really happened. The fact is, we are in samsara. Samsara is beginningless. Tad upadehe anaditvat. That because of the upadi, the cause is beginningless. The cause confusion between anatma and atma is beginningless. So jiva bhavaha api anadi bhavati. Therefore, Jiva Bhava, that I am this limited individual, that is also Anadi, beginningless. So the student is worried. Anaditvat anadehe nasha na ishyate. What is beginningless will not have destruction also. Like Atma, we say is eternal, is beginningless. It has no end. Anadi Ananta. So he concludes, samsara hai, ananta hai, anaditvat, atmavat. Samsara has no end because it is beginningless, like the Atma. This is his deduction. This is inference. He continues that in the next verse also. So the end of beginningless Jiva Bhava is not acceptable, proper, or logical. अतोस्य जीवभावोऽपि अतोस्य जीवभावोऽपि नित्या भवति संश्रुतिः नित्या भवति संश्रुतिः न निवर्तेत तन्मोक्षः न निवर्तेत तन्मोक्षः कथं मे श्रीगुरो वद कथं मे श्रीगुरो वद अतोस्य जीवभावोऽपि नित्या भवति संश्रुतिः न निवर्तेत तन्मोक्षः कथं मे श्रीगुरो वद. Since the upadhi is beginningless and since ignorance is beginningless, since the transference is beginningless, ataha, therefore, asya, the jiva bhava, must be beginningless. So asya here refers to the paramatmanaha. This paramatma also must have eternal jivatvam. The jiva bhava can be understood as samsara. Samsara is beginningless. Therefore, conclusion is samsritihi na nivarteta. The samsara will never go away because it is eternal. Remember, this is not Vedantic teaching. Okay, as I am saying all this, this is a student in ignorance is asking. This is the Shishya's question. Based on this, his wrong conclusion. We are going to show that the Shishya is wrong. Where the fault lies, we will see, explore. Here we are just quoting the Shishya's question and his assumption. Samsara is eternal, therefore moksha is not possible. That is the conclusion he has come to. Tat moksha katam me Sri Guru vada. Oh Guru, you please tell me, how is moksha possible for me? How will I get moksha? How can there be liberation? Is doubt. The student has that doubt. He should ask this question. Now let us see what the Guru says. What is the Guru's answer? Shri Guru Ruvacha Samyak Prashtam Tvaya Vidvan Samyak Prashtam Tvaya Vidvan Savadhanena Tashruno Savadhanena Tashruno Pramaniki na bhavati Pramaniki bhavat na bhavati Bhrantya mohita kalpana Bhrantya mohita kalpana Samyak prishtam tvaya vidvan Savadhanena tachrunu Pramaniki na bhavati Brantya mohita kalpana. So the student has addressed the teacher with reverence in the previous verse. Shri Guru Vata. Oh teacher, please tell me, please clear my doubt. Hmm? Student is humble, humility is seen here. And in response, the teacher reciprocates with consideration, love, and affection and appreciation. The teacher addresses the student with one, oh, intelligent student. Even though the question is wrong, mistakenly in confusion, but he still appreciate. You are a good student, you are a thinking student, you are listening, and you have this doubt and you have raised this. So, tvaya samyak prashtam. A very good question you've asked. Well thought out question. Come up with. Legitimate question, very legitimate question. Now, tat shunu. May you listen to that. The answer that I'm going to give, you please listen. Yes. Samyak tvaya prishtam. You asked a brilliant question, no doubt. So now, savadhanena, attentively, with an open mind, without jumping to conclusions, you listen. Don't assume there cannot be any answer. But may you listen to the answer. Carefully, alertly, please listen. So he says, Brantya mohita kalpana paramaniki na bhavati. Anything that is mohita, erroneously, kalpana, superimposed, imagine, brantya, due to delusion. Anything that is erroneously superimposed due to delusion or ignorance, pramaniki na bhavati, is not factual. Something comes out of delusion, ignorance, whatever conclusion you draw, that will not be a fact. It's really non-existent. It's really not there. So what the teacher is trying to arrive at is, suppose we talk about a rope snake. The perception of snake is because of delusion. In ignorance, you are thinking that it is a snake. So if somebody asks, when did the snake arrive? Really speaking, there's no answer to that question. Why? Snake has not really arrived. Only if the snake has come, you can talk about when it arrived. It's a question of arrival of the snake, because there's no snake at all. Therefore, when a person falsely perceives a snake, something else, a piece of rope that is there, but it. So temporarily we accept a snake. So temporarily I have to give an answer. It is anadi. Okay. Okay. If the snake comes, it is anadi. It is there from the beginning itself. Or that it was there even before. It means the one whose beginning cannot be talked about because never is there. It's really not there. We have to be very careful. Anadi is a very technical word. It does not mean that it exists without a beginning. Poof, it just came. Not like that. It means that we cannot talk about its beginning because it really does not exist. Therefore, upon gaining the knowledge of the rope, the snake does not die. Why does the snake not die? For the same reason, it did not arrive in the first place. It was never born. It's not there for it to die. The ending of the snake is really not the end of the snake. It is just the understanding that it never was. Understanding it has no beginning, no end. Because it's all an illusion. Therefore, after knowing the rope, I do not say now the snake has gone. I say there was no snake at all. So seemingly anadi snake has a seeming end on the wake of knowledge. It's any error is beginningless only, but it has an end. Here, errors are beginningless because they are born out of beginningless ignorance. But upon knowledge, I know their non-existence. I know that they are not there. Therefore, mistakes, errors do have an end. So he says, Brantya mohita kalpana na pramaniki bhavati. It is non-factual. Something that is arising out of confusion, ignorance, delusion. It cannot be considered as a valid means of knowledge. Okay? Pramanika na bhavati. It cannot be considered valid. Cannot be considered true. Cannot be considered real. It is not a fact. If that upadhi was a real entity, and then it was a beginning, and it was beginningless, then it would be endless. Then liberation will not be possible. All that will be true. But the question is whether that upadhi is real. Question is whether that snake is real in the first place. So now that the bondage has come to Atma, as it were, because of its association with the upadhi, ask yourself, is the upadhi real entity or it is a delusion? If it were real and beginningless, like Atma, Atma is real, Satchit, Ananda, it is Sat, it is real, and it is Anadi. Therefore, it is Ananta. If it's a real entity, if it is beginningless, it doesn't have. But if false entity, which is unreal, it is not real. If it is beginningless, it'll have an end. The upadhi, your body, your mind, everything, it's a figment of imagination. It's a fictitious entity. It is real in the Vyavaharika plane. The Paramartha. So keep that in mind. Don't ask, what do you mean? My body is not real. So, upadhi is not a real thing. And further, remember one more thing. We never say just because upadhi is there, there is bondage. This samsara, etc., this bondage, samsara, etc. The presence of upadhi does not create bondage. On top of that, what do? The identification born out of our ignorance. Okay, that is what creates bondage. In ignorance, we take the qualities of the upadhi to be mine. The superimposition, that adhyasa, the transference also we do. And that comes about because of ignorance. It's not the presence of upadhi that creates a bondage. The type of relationship that we have with it, that is the reason for your bondage. You say avidya, ignorance is beginningless. Yes. But that is not a real entity. It also ends when knowledge comes. Ignorance goes away when knowledge comes. That itself shows it's not a real entity. Something that is real, it should always be there. That is the definition. So ignorance, we say, is beginningless because we cannot put a point as its beginning. That's all. So please know one thing, your understanding, the upadhi is there, and because of the relationship with it, liberation will not be possible because upadhi will not end being beginningless. That is your conclusion. That is wrong. That is not correct. There are millions of objects in the world. They themselves are not creating any problems for you. It's only the relationship that you have with those objects that create a problem. How many things are there in this world? Does all of them bother you? Only a few things that you come in contact with. How many? 7 billion plus people are there. Are those billions of people causing you any problem? No. Only your neighbor. Only very few. Your son or daughter. Or that little rascal that runs around, the Dennis the Menace, creating problem for you. He's living right next to you. Only very few things. So that itself shows. So if all these objects are real, and every one of them should be, creating problems for you. So it's only when you have a relationship. Upadhi does not create the bondage. It is tadatmyam. Tadatmyam means identification. With that is creating trouble. Identification is due to the ignorance. That ignorance can end. The ignorance can end with knowledge. Ignorance is beginningless because you cannot find its beginning, that's all. Ignorance, because of which you have this kind of a relationship, that ignorance is not a real thing. So your problems are also not real. However much you think, oh my God, you don't know, let me tell you. No, it is not real. So problems can end, therefore moksha is possible. Right? On that happy note, let's conclude the class. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.